This is the month 1 update for my 40-gallon guppy tank. Here's a photograph of what the tank looked like after the initial setup, and here's an update photo of what it looks like right now. So starting with the guppies, and I've only had them 2 days, but this tank has been cycled for a while now. The Christmas break put an initial delay on ordering the fish, and then there was an additional delay with the courier, so they couldn't be shipped out to me for another week. One important point to note is that all of these guppies are male, so there won't be any breeding and problems with population control in the tank. My main goal with this tank is to try and add as much colour as possible via the fish, so I did choose to go with a number of different guppy strains. At the time of recording, the tank has blue cobras, green cobras, yellow cobras, red cobras, snow whites, bumblebees, kois, flames, blondes and king cobras. Now I really don't think that what was sent out as king cobras are actually king cobra guppies. They don't look anything like it, and the blondes do look a little off too, but other than that I am pretty happy with how the rest of the fish look. As usual, I put the fish into my viewing booth for a couple of minutes before adding them to the main tank to try and look for any obvious signs of infection, but there doesn't seem to be any major problems with the fish. One of the guppies does have a rip in its tail, and one of the snow white guppies was struggling to swim correctly, and unfortunately that snow white guppy did pass within about 2 hours of being in the tank. I was actually really surprised by how quickly my Amano shrimp were able to strip that guppy down to the bone, and I doubt it even took them 12 hours to eat all of the flesh off it. As expected, all of the guppies did bunch up into one corner of the tank when I initially added them, and this only lasted for about 10 minutes. I do usually like to turn the tank lights off to let new fish settle in, but by the time I'd cleaned all of the packaging up from what the guppies were shipped in, I came back to turn the lights on and they were already spreading out to explore their tank. After about another 20 minutes, they were all over the tank just exploring and settling in, so I decided to just leave the lights on. All of these guppies were added to the tank at the same time from the same batch, so it is kind of acting like a pseudo quarantine tank right now for the next month or two. Once I'm confident that these guppies don't have any problems, I might add the guppies from my smaller 12-gallon guppy tank to this tank and then restock the 12-gallon with something else. So far the guppies seem to have settled in and be happy in their new home. They're really active and constantly swimming around in all layers of the tank exploring, and I haven't had any problems with aggression either. Because I've only had the guppies for 2 days, I haven't been able to try many different foods with them right now, but I have tried flake-based food and they do eat it, unlike the majority of my other fish. I've also tried some frozen Daphnia with them and they really seem to enjoy it, but I will be trying a lot of different foods with them over the coming weeks. Moving on to the inverts in this tank, and there are currently 22 cherry shrimp, 10 Amano shrimp and 2 horned neurite snails. For some reason, getting horned neurite snails in the UK right now is an absolute pain, and the guy I usually get them from said he probably won't be able to get them for another couple of weeks. I was always going to be adding inverts to this tank anyway because I do actually enjoy watching what they get up to, but this tank did have an algae breakout stage. The majority of the algae in the tank was the soft green algae and the brown diatom algae. That's quite normal with new tanks, but the current cleanup crew did manage to deal with it within about a week. The cherry shrimp are from my colony in the 29-gallon tank that I have, and the majority of them are self-bred, so they are free because the price of cherry shrimp in the UK has gone up quite a bit since I last bought some. Thankfully, the cherry shrimp in that 29-gallon tank breed like crazy, and I was able to get as many as I wanted without issue, and it ended up saving me around £90. As the cherry shrimp are used to living in very similar water parameters to what's in my 40-gallon tank, they settled in right away and started to get to work eating the algae that was there. I'm curious if the cherry shrimp will start to breed in this tank as well, just like the other one, but time will tell. I ordered the Amano shrimp off eBay, and I've used that particular guy a bunch of times and never had problems with his shrimp. Amano shrimp do seem to be really hardy in my experience, and they settled into the tank pretty much instantly and started to eat the algae and detritus right away. One good thing about the Amano shrimp is that I did see them feeding on the melted crypt leaves quite a lot this month, and I'd rather the crypt leaves be turned into food for the shrimp rather than something that's going to generate ammonia in the tank. With the algae bloom in this tank being under control now, I will be target feeding the shrimp by intentionally adding food just for them, and for the most part it will be Hikari microalgae wafers. Both the Amano shrimp and the cherry shrimp seem to be molting in this tank without issue, so I am happy about that. So moving on to the plants in the tank, and as you can see there's been a whole bunch of changes this month. I finally managed to get some Limnophilia sessiliflora, Rotala rotundifolia and Bacopa caroliniana that was out of stock for weeks, and I added them to the rear of the tank behind the retaining wall. I also decided to give Rotala orange juice a try and picked it up at the same time and put that behind the retaining wall in the tank as well, but all of the other plants in here have had around 2 weeks head start on growth than these. The cryptocorin field in this tank has gone through its initial melt stage. As expected, around half of the crypts in this tank melted and the other half really had minimal issues, and for some reason it's always like this in my tanks. Half melt, half remain the same. These cryptocorin Wentiae greens melted right back and there was barely anything left, but they've seen really strong growth over the last couple of weeks. I'm actually surprised by how strong they've bounced back and they're doing really well. This particular crypt does seem to be growing back far slower than every other one that melted in the tank, but it is starting to show signs of growth, thankfully. Here's a quick update on the stem plants, and the Hygrophila polysperma grew rapidly and it reached the surface of the tank within 2 or 3 weeks. The Cryptocorin Oosteriana melted right back and it is slowly starting to show signs of growth, but I might actually remove this and just put more stem plants here. The Pogostemon erectus is growing far slower than everything else in this tank, but it is listed as requiring CO2 on the Tropica site, and I'm not dosing CO2 in this tank, so that's probably why. I did trim the Echinodorus Belleri leaves down a couple of weeks ago because they were starting to melt and I did want to encourage new plant growth. In the end though, I ended up actually removing the Echinodorus Belleri from the tank because it will be grown too big for this tank size, and I've actually given it to one of my friends. This has left a gap in the back of the tank and I'll probably just put cuttings here from the other stem plants as they need trimming over the coming weeks and wait for them all to grow out. The Ludwigia Mini Super Red has grown at a rapid pace in this tank and I'm actually shocked because it's my first red plant and it seems very easy to grow. The Limnophilia Sessilflora has just been doing Limnophilia Sessilflora things all month and grown at a rapid pace, and it touched the surface of the tank within about 2 weeks and it's just shown no signs of slowing its growth rate. Thankfully, the Limnophilia doesn't seem to be growing leggy, so that does suggest that the lighting in this tank is optimal for plant growth, so I'm happy about that because I've had problems in other tanks. The Rotala rotundifolia is grown, but I would say it's more of a medium pace and it's nowhere near the surface yet, but there's definitely been growth on this plant. The same goes for the Rotala orange juice as well, but this is listed as requiring CO2 for healthy growth, but so far its growth rate has been about the same as the Rotala rotundifolia, but I am curious about if it will colour up with the orange colour. The Bacopa caroliniana is grown at a slow pace, but this is expected as it's a slow grower. It is listed at like this on the Tropica website, but a lot of people think that this should grow fast as it's a stem plant, but that is not the case. My Hygrophila polysperma rosanvarig is grown at a rapid pace, but rather than just growing vertically, it does seem to be focusing on some horizontal growth right now. I'm not sure if this is normal with this plant, as it's the first time I've ever kept it in my tanks, and I didn't even know that was meant to develop this pink tint, but I did ask James when I was down at Horizon Aquatics a few weeks ago and he told me that's totally normal. The Java moss on the 2 Java moss covered rocks do seem to be growing fine, but they were covered in brown diatom algae earlier this month, but thankfully the cherry shrimp picked them clean within a couple of days. I have noticed 2 natural stray Java moss colonies forming in this tank. There's this one that definitely seems to have taken hold on the lava rock and be grown in the tank without issue, so I'm curious how this one turns out. There's also this one where the majority of the Java moss strand is free flowing in the water column, so I'm not sure if it's secure in place yet. My Salvinia is growing faster than it ever has in any of my other tanks, so again I'm just taking that as a sign that the lighting in this tank is optimal. I am trying to grow pothos as an emerged plant in this tank as an experiment, and it is the first time that I've tried it and results are varied. One of the types of pothos just turned brown and basically shriveled up within days. Initially I did think that this would be a lighting issue because the main tank light is below the pothos, so I picked up this growth light off Amazon and the remaining pothos does seem to be picking up their growth. The 2 marble queens are showing new growth with fresh leaves forming and their roots are starting to grow out. I have noticed that some of the guppies do like to hang out in the roots of the pothos from time to time, and I am hoping that this becomes more frequent as the roots in the tank start to grow out. The other 2 types of pothos do seem to be slowly picking up after being light starved for a while, but I'm not sure if they'll make it at this stage, but they are starting to pick up. Moving on to the water parameters of the tank, and I do naturally have soft water out of the tap, but guppies are a hard water fish, so I have manually had to increase pH. I chose to use API pH up as it's easy to find in the UK and pretty much every pet shop will sell API products. So far my plan does seem to be working though. I added my shrimp to the tank first because they were used to similar water parameters from my 29-gallon tank. After the shrimp had a chance to settle in, I did start to slowly dose the pH up into the tank in small amounts each day to bring it up to around a pH of 7.0. Time will tell if this will work, but so far it does seem to be be going well and it doesn't seem to have generated any problems in the tank. The ammonia and nitrite levels in the tank have been around 0 ppm for a few weeks now, but due to having to order the guppies online, I had no option but to add them all at the same time and spike the bio load in the tank. I am hoping that this won't be much of an issue, and I will be doing daily water parameter checks with my test kit, and if required I will be doing daily water changes. The nitrate in this tank really hasn't been much of a problem either. It's pretty much constant, and I'm guessing it's something to do with the pothos using it for growth and potentially the salvinia. I would love this tank to be a 0 water change tank eventually, but for the first few months I've got no problems at all doing regular water changes until everything balances out. That's pretty much it for this month. Thanks for watching and have a good day.